Welcome to Shot Recap. Today's movie is Nosferatu. A young attorney travels to an old mansion to sell a house to the mysterious count living there, but the buyer turns out to be an ancient monster hunting the lawyer's wife.
The undead plague carrier, Nosferatu.
The story takes place in the early 19th century. Young Ellen prays in the night, begging her guardian angel to free her from loneliness and sorrow. But instead, a dark shadow answers, speaking in a foreign tongue and luring her outside. During a moonlit walk, Ellen falls into a trance, sees a sinister creature, and starts convulsing not like a dance, but in a full-blown epileptic seizure. A few years pass. The year is now 1838. Ellen lives in the German town of Wisborg with her husband and their cat, and it's unclear who really runs the house. Her husband, Thomas Hutter, works as a real estate agent for Mr. Knock's firm. His boss promises him a promotion if he completes an important task, traveling to Bohemia to close a real estate deal with a local aristocrat, Count Orlok.
It will be a great adventure.
When Ellen hears the news, she's deeply upset. She's haunted by bad feelings about the trip and disturbing dreams where her husband appears slightly dead. But Thomas has to take the job. They've got debts to pay off. To ease her worries, he sends Ellen to stay with friends, shipowner Friedrich Harding and his wife Anna, who are raising twin daughters and expecting a third child. That night, visibly anxious, Ellen cuts off a lock of her hair. Thomas's boss, Mr. Knock, spends his free time performing occult rituals in the nude, and not tastefully so. The next day, as Ellen sees her husband off, she gives him a locket with a lock of her hair, just to remind him not to fool around with any Bohemian girl. Thomas mounts his horse and sets off on his assignment. Once in Bohemia, he stops at a local inn, where the Roma folks there start laughing at him for no clear reason, until the innkeeper shows up. It takes some effort, but Thomas manages to get a bed in the grim, unfriendly place. That night, Thomas looks out the window and sees a live reenactment of how the peasants tried to kill him. A line of Roma riders, one with a naked woman on horseback, heads toward the cemetery. There, they dig up a grave, pull out a coffin, and drive a metal stake into the body inside. Thomas wakes up in shock in his bed, but the dirt on his feet suggests he really did wander through the graveyard. In the morning, Thomas discovers that the villagers have vanished along with his horse. Left with no choice, he sets out on foot into the mountains toward Count Orlok's castle. After nightfall, he spots a driverless carriage moving down the road. It nearly runs him over, then suddenly turns sideways across the path and opens its door as if inviting him in. Thomas hops in, and the ride through the scenic wilderness begins with a pack of wolves following close behind. Soon, he arrives at the castle gates, where a mysterious figure greets him and leads him upstairs. Inside, the guest finally meets the eerie and imposing master of the house, Count Orlok. Thomas presents the documents, which the Count reviews carefully while teleporting around the dining hall and offering refreshments. During dinner, Thomas accidentally cuts his hand with a knife, instantly grabbing the Count's full attention. Orlok claims he can heal the wound and moves in with a disturbing intensity. Thomas wakes up to find himself lying on the floor of an empty dining hall. As he wanders the castle, he discovers a mirror and notices strange marks on his chest, as if bitten by a wild animal. By evening, the Count prepares to sign the contract. But the deal requires Thomas's signature. He hesitates, refusing to sign a document written in an unknown language. After all, people back then didn't blindly agree to things they didn't understand. Orlok notices Ellen's medallion and asks to examine it, then forgets to give it back. The Count insists Thomas sign the papers, promising a pouch of gold as a reward, wanting to get the formalities over with. Thomas signs, then asks to leave quickly, claiming he's feeling unwell, but the host insists he stay until he recovers. When Thomas wakes the next morning, he sees the wounds on his chest haven't healed. In fact, they've grown worse. Sensing something's wrong, Thomas tries to flee the castle, but the gates are locked, of course. Exploring the place, he descends into the basement and finds an ornate carved coffin fit for the most stylish of the dead. Inspecting the occult symbols, he lifts the lid. Inside, the Count lies peacefully. Grabbing a pickaxe, Thomas prepares to finish off the vampire, but suddenly, the Count awakens. Startled, Thomas steps back as the Count first sniffs Ellen's hairlock on the medallion, then unleashes a sinister shadow that takes control of Thomas's will. Locked in his room, Thomas falls into a trance and opens the door himself, giving the Vertilac access to his blood. Meanwhile, back in Wisborg, Ellen also falls under the Count's sinister influence. Wandering the streets in a trance, she steps outside late at night. Later, Dr. Wilhelm Sievers examines her, attributing her sleepwalking to mental distress, and prescribes laudanum and opium tincture to calm her nerves. Waking up in the morning, Thomas finds himself guarded by black dogs. He escapes through a window, onto a ledge, and like a skilled assassin, makes a leap of faith not into a haystack, but into the flowing river below. Back in Wiesborg, Ellen struggles with growing melancholy, fearing something has happened to her husband. The Harding couple, who have taken her in, witness her suffering an epileptic seizure. Dr. Sievers is informed about a new patient who reportedly killed several sheep barehanded and devoured their raw meat. The guest at the Yellow House turns out to be Mr. Knock himself, the very man who sent Thomas to Count Orlok. Sitting apart from the respectable folks, he predicts his master's imminent arrival and tries to imitate Ozzy Osbourne, only he bites off pigeons' heads instead of bats. The doctor doesn't want to bite him, and the kindly orderly just calms him down with a baton. Later, watching another of Ellen's seizures, Dr. Sievers admits to Friedrich Harding that he can't find a cure for her condition. But there's some good news. The town is hosting his mentor and teacher, Professor Albin Eberhard von Franz, a man well-versed in these matters, though his colleagues think he's a bit crazy for blaming illnesses on occult causes. Meanwhile, Thomas is pulled from the river by nuns from an Orthodox monastery. After reviving him, they urge him to stay within the holy walls, where no evil of the flesh can reach him, but Thomas knows he has to return home. The hellish count, carrying Ellen's medallion for scent, is already traveling by ship, disguised as cargo, sealed inside a coffin-like crate. The crew faces mounting troubles, dying under mysterious circumstances. One night, a sailor armed with an axe descends into the hold to get to the root of their misfortune, but when he opens the lid, he realizes they're all doomed instead of the sinister vampire. Hundreds of plague rats swarm inside, while the vampire himself waits nearby, ready to strike. Soon, the deserted ship sails full speed toward shore. Dr. Sievers and Friedrich visit Professor von Franz. Von Franz immediately insists that Ellen's illness lies beyond medicine. It's a sign of true evil at work. After seeing her, he asks Ellen to describe her visions, and that night, when she falls into a trance again, he examines her closely to prove that the girl is under a dark influence. The professor pricks her hand with a needle, but she feels no pain. As von Franz reads a prayer to exorcise the evil spirit, the Count suddenly speaks through Ellen's body. The professor suggests they're dealing with a powerful mythical creature, a vampire known as Nosferatu, a legend found in cultures around the world. At Knock's asylum, he has a seizure. When they untie him for an exam, he attacks a guard and escapes. That night, Ellen senses someone approaching and runs outside, where she finds a weary Thomas. Shortly after, authorities summon Friedrich. One of his ships has wrecked on the shore, releasing hundreds of plague rats from the timber. Among the debris, there's no sign of the coffin. Loyal Knock has already taken the crate and is transporting it to a specially prepared estate to serve as a refuge. By morning, the town is overrun with rats from the wrecked ship, spreading disease everywhere. Dr. Sievers and Professor von Franz examine the body of a dead sailor. Despite showing plague symptoms, the body is completely drained of blood, which only convinces von Franz that the death and the rising plague outbreak have a supernatural cause. They're also informed that Knock has escaped from the asylum. That same night, Count Orlok stretches his hand over the town. His massive black shadow reaches across the streets toward the Harding home, where Ellen and the recovering Thomas are staying. Bitten by the vampire, the husband, seeing the tempter in a vision, pushes his wife away. Frightened, Ellen asks Anna, who's just put the children to bed, to stay with her until her fear passes. But as soon as they drift off, Ellen hallucinates a visit from the infamous Count. Orlok reveals that her prayer years ago awakened him and bound them with unbreakable ties. He's come to town to claim her, having tricked Thomas into signing a divorce agreement for a handful of coins. Now, he needs her to willingly agree to become his concubine. Ellen realizes the vampire deceived her husband and refuses to submit. Then the Count switches to harsher tactics, threatening to take away her loved ones over the next 3 nights unless she obeys without question. Orlok leaves, and Ellen wakes up in bed. She notices Anna is missing, only to find her lying on the floor, being gnawed on by plague rats. In the morning, Ellen tries to explain to Friedrich that a terrible monster is behind what happened to his wife, but not sharing her beliefs.
We're all going to die!
He asks the visitors, Ellen and her sick husband, to leave the house. Forced to go, they make their way through streets littered with corpses, where rats roam freely, spreading the plague. Professor von Franz and Dr. Sievers search Knock's abandoned home. They find a book on occult rituals and signs that they were recently performed. Returning to Friedrich, they learn he has kicked Ellen and Thomas out. In the evening, the couple argues as the husband starts feeling better. Ellen confesses to a long-ago connection with the mysterious Count, whom she accidentally summoned in a moment of despair. She then accuses Thomas of not writing to her. Nervous, Ellen has a seizure and falls into a trance. After recovering, she apologizes, and the night ends in passionate intimacy. During their passionate encounter, Count Orlok telepathically intervenes, triggering another seizure in Ellen. Offended to the core of his vile vampire soul by this betrayal, the Count moves to keep his earlier promise. Orlok sneaks into the Harding house, where brave Friedrich sleeps clutching a pistol, but the weapon is useless against the powerful vampire. Friedrich doesn't even wake as Ellen senses danger. Anna rushes to the children's bedroom, only to find the Count has drained all the blood from their daughters before turning his attention to her. In the morning, Anna and her daughters are buried. A grieving Friedrich spots Ellen with Professor von Franz. In a panic, he tries to drive her away, blaming her for what happened, but Thomas and Dr. Sievers calm him down. On the way back to town in the carriage, the group discusses their plan to hunt Orlok. The professor points out that in every Nosferatu legend, there's a common rule: the vampire must return to the earth where he was buried before dawn. If they find the refuge where that earth is kept and consecrate it, the vampire will have nowhere to return. But this is just a trick. After studying Knock's book the night before, von Franz realizes that the vampire can only be destroyed by the voluntary sacrifice of a pure maiden who stays with him until dawn. He secretly tells Ellen, the one Orlok has chosen, as his target. Gathering their courage, the men set out to find the coffin, everyone except the heartbroken Friedrich. He goes to the crypt, where he once buried his wife and children. Showing signs of plague, he opens the coffin and gives in, one last time, to forbidden intimacy with his wife's body. There, he's found dead by Thomas and his companions. To stop the curse from spreading, they burn the bodies. The remaining trio of hunters, having lost their craven, head toward the mansion previously bought by Knock. Spotting the coffin, Thomas opens the lid and drives a stake into the body, but it's not the Count, it's Knock, his loyal assistant. Meanwhile, Orlok himself is already on his way to Ellen, who waits for him as part of von Franz's plan. Realizing things aren't so simple, Thomas races across town back to his wife, while his companions burn the coffin with the remains inside. Dressed in her wedding gown, Ellen waits for the Count to arrive. He indulges in sinful passion with her, draining her life force along with her blood, but the process drags on until dawn. As the first rays of sunlight filter into the room, Ellen holds Orlok's decaying body tight, preventing him from escaping before his final destruction. Thomas finds his dead wife lying in bed, embraced by the rotting corpse. Professor von Franz scatters flowers over her body, reminding everyone that through her sacrifice, Ellen saved the entire town from an impending supernatural nightmare. And with this tragic note, the story ends.